Olivia Parker's fingers trembled as she poured herself another glass of wine, the crystal catching the flickering light from her fireplace. The silence in her pristine suburban home felt suffocating tonight, broken only by the soft hum of her security system and the distant sound of winter wind against her windows. She had spent the evening reviewing contracts, her laptop screen casting a cold blue glow across her marble countertops. But concentration had abandoned her hours ago. The scent of vanilla candles, mixed with the faint aroma of her untouched dinner delivery, creating an atmosphere of manufactured comfort that felt increasingly hollow. She moved through her living room, adjusting pillows that were already perfect, straightening magazines that lay in precise angles on her coffee table. Everything in her world existed in careful order, from her color-coordinated bookshelves to her spotless kitchen where she rarely cooked. A sharp, crackling sound made her pause, wine glass halfway to her lips. The fireplace had been burning for hours, its logs now reduced to glowing embers. But this sound was different, sharper, more urgent. She set down her glass and walked toward the source of the noise, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The electrical panel in her utility room was sparking violently, orange flames dancing across the wall like angry fingers. Olivia stared, in disbelief, her legal mind struggling to process what her eyes were telling her. Fire was consuming the perfectly organized space where she stored her winter coats and emergency supplies she never thought she would need. "No, no, no," she whispered, grabbing her phone with shaking hands. The flames were spreading faster than seemed possible, reaching toward the ceiling with hungry determination. Smoke began to fill the small room, and she stumbled backward, her throat burning as she tried to dial emergency services. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor as thick smoke poured into her living room. Her carefully curated world was disappearing behind a wall of gray, and panic seized her chest like a vice. She had always been in control, always had a plan, but fire followed no legal precedent. She dropped to her knees, crawling toward where she thought the front door should be, but the smoke was too thick. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, and tears streamed down her face as she realized how utterly unprepared she was for this moment. Her perfectly organized emergency kit was trapped in the room where the fire had started, and her expensive security system seemed useless against the chaos consuming her home. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by heavy footsteps. Olivia tried to call out, but her voice was lost in violent coughing. Strong hands found her shoulders, and she felt herself being lifted from the floor with surprising gentleness, despite the urgency of the moment. "I've got you," a deep voice said near her ear, calm and steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Just breathe slowly and let me carry you out of here." She wanted to protest, to maintain some semblance of control, but her body had betrayed her completely. The stranger's arms were solid and secure as he navigated through the smoke-filled house, his movements confident and deliberate. Fresh air hit her face like a blessing, and she gasped desperately as they emerged onto her front lawn. He lowered her gently onto the grass, his hands checking her pulse with practiced efficiency. Through her watering eyes, she saw a black man in firefighter gear, his face illuminated by the flashing lights of emergency vehicles that had arrived with impossible speed. His movements were methodical and professional, but his eyes held a warmth that surprised her. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" he asked, shining a small flashlight into her eyes to check for signs of serious smoke inhalation. "Olivia," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "Olivia Parker." "Ms. Parker, I'm Malik Johnson with the fire department. You're safe now, but I need to make sure you're okay. Can you take a deep breath for me?" She tried to comply, but her lungs protested with another fit of coughing. He supported her back with one hand while reaching for his radio with the other, calling for paramedics in a voice that remained completely calm. Everything about him radiated competence and control, qualities she had always prided herself on possessing. "My house," she said, between coughs, looking back at the flames that were now visible through her windows. "Everything I worked for. Things can be replaced," Malik said simply, continuing his assessment of her condition. "What matters is that you're alive." The simplicity of his statement hit her harder than the smoke had. In her world of corporate law and carefully maintained appearances. She had forgotten that truth. As she sat on her perfectly manicured lawn, watching her life's work burn, she felt more vulnerable than she had in years. Hello, my Stop Racism Extra family. Thank you for tuning in today. Before we dive deeper into the story, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments below. Also, I'd love to know your thoughts. What did you think of the story so far? Let us know in the comments. We love reading them, and trust me, your words motivate us to keep making these videos. Let's make this video reach at least 50 comments. Source support means the world to us, and it drives us to create even more meaningful content for you. So don't forget to comment, share, and keep the positivity flowing. The acrid smell of smoke and water damage filled Olivia's nostrils as she stood in what had been her pristine living room. Sooty water dripped from her once white ceiling, creating dark stains on her hardwood floors that would never be the same. Her leather furniture sat waterlogged and ruined, the carefully arranged throw pillows now scattered and destroyed. Malik appeared in her doorway, his helmet tucked under his arm, his face streaked with soot. He moved through her home with the careful precision of someone who had seen too many disasters, his boots leaving muddy prints on what remained of her perfect floors. "The fire's completely out," he said, his voice cutting through the silence that had settled over the destruction. "The electrical damage is extensive, but the structure is sound. You'll need to have everything inspected before you can live here." Again, Olivia nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as she surveyed the wreckage. Her wine glass still sat on the coffee table, miraculously unbroken, a strange monument to how quickly her world had changed. The magazines she had straightened earlier were now scattered across the floor, their pages warped and water damaged. "I don't understand how this happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything was working fine. I had the electrical system updated last year." Malik walked to where the fire had started, examining the blackened electrical panel with professional interest. "Sometimes these things just happen. Old wiring, a power surge, moisture in the wrong place. It's not your fault." The calmness in his voice caught her off guard. She was used to dealing with people who wanted something from her, who approached her with calculated courtesy or professional distance. But this stranger was offering her comfort with no expectation of return, and she found herself unsure how to respond. "I should offer you something," she said, falling back on the social protocols that had always guided her interactions. "Coffee or water or ... "I'm still on duty," Malik interrupted gently, but his eyes held no judgment. "My crew is finishing up outside. Is there someone you can call? Family or friends who can help you tonight?" The question hung in the air between them, and Olivia realized how empty her contact list suddenly felt. She had colleagues and acquaintances, people she networked with and met for carefully scheduled lunches, but no one she could call at midnight to say her house had burned down. "I'll figure something out," she said, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "I always do." Malik studied her face for a moment. She had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing through her carefully maintained facade. "Ms. Parker, when was the last time you let someone help you?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She prided herself on her independence, on her ability to handle whatever life threw at her with competence and grace. But standing in her ruined home, wearing clothes that smelled like smoke, and speaking to a man who had literally carried her to safety, she felt the weight of her isolation. "I don't need help," she said automatically, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Malik replied, his tone matter of fact rather than condescending. "It's not a weakness to accept it." He walked to her kitchen, which had escaped the worst of the fire, but was still damaged by smoke and water. Opening her refrigerator, he found a bottle of water and handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. His hands were warm and calloused, so different from the soft hands of the lawyers and executives she usually encountered. "Thank you," she said, accepting the water with a gratitude that surprised her. "For everything? I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." "It's what I do," Malik said simply. "But you don't have to thank me for caring whether you live or die." The statement hung between them, raw and honest in a way that made Olivia's chest tighten. She was used to conversations filled with subtext and carefully chosen words. But Malik spoke with a directness that left no room for misunderstanding. "I should let you get back to your crew," she said, suddenly aware of how she must look with her disheveled hair and smoke-stained clothes. Malik nodded, but he didn't move toward the door immediately. Instead, he pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on her water-damaged coffee table. "If you need anything, or if you have questions about the restoration process, you can call me." She looked at the card, noting his name printed in simple block letters. No fancy logo or impressive title, just his name and phone number. It was the most honest business card she had ever received. "I will," she said, knowing as she spoke that she probably wouldn't. People like her didn't call people like him outside of emergencies. After he left, Olivia stood alone in her ruined home, holding his card and wondering why she felt more seen by a stranger than she had by anyone in years. The hotel room smelled like artificial pine and industrial carpet cleaner, a stark contrast to the vanilla candles and expensive perfumes that usually surrounded Olivia. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Malik's business card, which had somehow survived the chaos of packing what little she could salvage from her home. 3 days had passed since the fire. 3 days of insurance calls and contractors who spoke in technical terms about restoration timelines and structural integrity. Everyone wanted to help her, but their help came with price tags and contracts. Professional courtesy that felt as artificial as the hotel's air freshener. Her phone buzzed with another message from her assistant about rescheduling client meetings. But Olivia found herself dialing Malik's number instead. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Malik Johnson. This is Olivia Parker," she said, suddenly feeling foolish for calling. "You gave me your card after the fire. I was wondering if you might know a good electrician." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and she could hear voices in the background, the sound of equipment being moved around. "I know a few guys who do good work. You looking to get estimates?" "I suppose I am," she said, realizing she had no clear plan for this conversation. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you must be busy." "It's no bother," Malik said, and she could hear the honesty in his voice. "I'm just finishing up a shift. I can text you some names and numbers if that would help." "That would be wonderful," Olivia said, surprised by how much his simple offer meant to her. "I really appreciate it." "Ms. Parker," Malik said, and she heard something shift in his tone. "Are you staying somewhere comfortable? The hotel treating you okay?" The question caught her off guard. In her world, people asked about business deals and professional opportunities, not about her personal comfort. "It's fine," she said automatically, then added, "Actually, it's terrible. Everything smells like chemicals and the walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbor's television." Malik's low chuckle surprised her. "Hotel living gets old fast. How long before you can move back home?" 6 weeks, maybe 8, she said, feeling the weight of those weeks pressing down on her. "I never realized how much I depended on my routines until they were gone." "Routines keep us sane," Malik agreed. "What did your morning routine look like before the fire?" She found herself describing her careful morning ritual, the specific coffee blend she ordered online, the way she arranged her newspapers, the exact temperature she kept her shower. As she spoke, she realized how rigid and lonely her routine sounded when said out loud. "Sounds peaceful," Malik said without judgment. "I bet you miss having your own space." "I miss having control," Olivia admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "I'm not used to depending on other people for basic things like where I sleep or what I eat." "Independence is important," Malik said, and she heard something in his voice that suggested he understood that need. "But sometimes circumstances force us to accept help whether we want it or not." "Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Johnson?" she asked, attempting levity. "That's my personal experience, Ms. Parker," he replied, and something in his tone made her sit up straighter. "I've been in situations where pride was a luxury I couldn't afford." The conversation had taken a turn she hadn't expected, moving from practical matters to something more personal. She found herself wanting to know more about this man, who had carried her from her burning house and now spoke to her like she was a real person rather than a professional contact. "Would you like to have coffee sometime?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I mean to thank you properly for saving my life." There was another pause. "Longer this time, Ms. Parker. You don't owe me anything. I was doing my job. I know, she said quickly, but I'd like to anyway. If you have time, I have time. Malik said, finally. There's a place called Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. Nothing fancy, but they make good coffee and they're open late for people with irregular schedules. That sounds perfect, Olivia said, though she had never been to a diner in her life. Tomorrow evening? 7 o'clock work for you. 7 o'clock, she confirmed, already wondering what she would wear to a place called Murphy's Diner. After they hung up, Olivia sat in her sterile hotel room, staring at her phone and wondering what had possessed her to ask a firefighter to coffee. She had never been impulsive, never acted without considering all the angles and potential consequences. But something about Malik's straightforward honesty made her want to be equally direct. She opened her laptop to research Murphy's Diner, finding reviews that described it as a neighborhood institution with checkered floors and bottomless coffee. The photos showed red vinyl booths and a menu written on a chalkboard. Nothing like the upscale restaurants where she usually conducted business. For the first time in days, she felt a flutter of anticipation rather than anxiety. Tomorrow evening, she would step out of her comfort zone and into a world where business cards didn't matter and conversations weren't calculated for maximum advantage. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find there, but she was certain it would be different from anything she had experienced before. Chapter 4. Small Talks. Big realizations. Word count 900. Narration 360. Dialogue 360. Description 180. Murphy's Diner existed in a world Olivia had never entered. Despite living in the same city for over a decade, the red vinyl booths were cracked with age, and the black and white checkered floor showed where patterns from thousands of customers who had sat in these same spots, sharing meals and conversations that mattered. She had changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, an outfit that felt simultaneously too casual and too formal for this unfamiliar environment. The other customers wore work clothes and comfortable shoes, their conversations flowing with the easy rhythm of people who knew each other's stories. Malik was already waiting in a corner booth when she arrived, his large frame somehow fitting naturally into the small space. He wore jeans and a simple blue shirt, and without his firefighter gear, he looked younger, more approachable. His smile was genuine when he saw her, and he stood as she approached the table. "Ms. Parker," he said, gesturing for her to sit across from him. "I'm glad you found the place okay. Please call me Olivia," she said, sliding into the booth. "And thank you for agreeing to meet me. I know your schedule must be unpredictable." A waitress appeared with coffee before Olivia had finished settling into her seat, filling 2 heavy ceramic mugs without being asked. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the precise French press she made at home, but it was warm and real in a way that surprised her. "I have to ask," Malik said, adding sugar to his coffee with practiced ease. "Have you ever been to a diner before?" The question made her laugh, a genuine sound that felt foreign in her throat. "Is it that obvious? You're sitting like you're about to negotiate a merger," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "And you studied the menu for 5 minutes before deciding on coffee." "I'm not used to places without wine lists," she admitted, feeling her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Most of my meals are business dinners or catered events." "That sounds exhausting," Malik said, and his tone held no judgment, only curiosity. "When do you eat just because you're hungry?" The question struck her as deeply personal, more intimate than anything she had been asked in years. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a meal simply because she wanted to, rather than because it served some professional purpose. "I don't think I do," she said quietly. "I schedule my meals like everything else in my life." Malik nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "I used to be like that when I first started with the fire department. Every minute planned, every meal timed, every conversation calculated. It's a way of feeling in control when everything else is chaos." "What changed?" she asked, genuinely curious about this man who seemed so comfortable in his own skin. "I realized that planning for everything means you're never really living anything," he said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "You can't schedule spontaneity, and you can't control the things that matter most." She studied his face, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and concern in equal measure. "Is that why you became a firefighter? Because you can't control when fires happen." "I became a firefighter because my father died in a house fire when I was 12, Malik said simply. "I spent years thinking I could prevent what happened to him from happening to other people. Took me a long time to understand that I can't save everyone, but I can save some people. And that has to be enough." The honesty of his statement hit her like a physical blow. She was used to people who spoke in carefully constructed sentences designed to create impressions rather than convey truth. But Malik spoke about loss and purpose with the same directness he used to discuss coffee preferences. "A tea," said, the words feeling inadequate. "That must have been terrible." "It was," Malik agreed, "but it taught me that life changes fast, and the only thing you can control is how you respond to those changes." "I don't know how to respond to change," Olivia said, surprising herself with the admission. "I've built my entire life around predictability. Same schedule, same restaurants, same people who want the same things from me." "What do you want?" Malik asked. "Not what your schedule demands or what other people expect. What do you actually want?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Olivia realized that no one had asked her that question in years, and she had no ready answer. She wanted her house back, her routine restored, her sense of control returned. But sitting across from this man who had literally carried her from chaos to safety, she wondered if those things were really what she needed. "I want to stop feeling like I'm performing my own life," she said finally. "I want to have conversations that matter with people who see me as more than a professional contact or a social connection." "You're having one now," Malik said gently. She looked around the diner at the other customers who were lost in their own conversations and concerns. At the waitress who had refilled their coffee without being asked. For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "AM," she said, and smiled at him across the scarred table. "I really am." They talked for 2 hours. Their conversation meandering through topics she had never discussed with anyone. Childhood fears and adult disappointments. The difference between loneliness and solitude. The challenge of maintaining hope in a world that often seemed designed to crush it. When they finally left the diner, Olivia felt like she had discovered something she hadn't known she was looking for. The hotel room felt different when Olivia returned from the diner, as if the conversation with Malik had somehow altered the molecular structure of the stale air and artificial lighting. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her jeans and cashmere sweater, and tried to process what had happened during those 2 hours of genuine conversation. Her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant about client meetings and contract revisions, but she found herself scrolling through them without her usual sense of urgency. The corporate language that had once felt like second nature now seemed foreign and unnecessarily complicated, full of words designed to obscure rather than illuminate. She had given Malik her personal number when they parted ways, something she never did with professional contacts. He had entered it into his phone without comment, as if the gesture was natural, rather than the significant boundary crossing it, represented in her carefully compartmentalized life. The next morning brought a text from him that made her smile before she was fully awake. "Hope you slept better than the neighbor's television allowed. The electrician I mentioned is named Dave Rodriguez. He's honest and does good work." She found herself typing a response immediately, then deleting it, then typing again. The simple act of text communication had become complicated because she couldn't fall back on professional courtesy or calculated politeness. Malik had somehow made her want to be real, even in digital messages. "Thank you for the recommendation and for last night. I enjoyed our conversation more than I expected to," she finally sent, then immediately regretted the formal tone. His response came quickly. "You sound like you're writing a business letter. Did you enjoy talking to me, or did you enjoy networking with a potential professional contact?" The directness of his question made her laugh out loud in her sterile hotel room. She could imagine him shaking his head at her formality, the same way he had smiled at her menu-studying performance at the diner. "I enjoyed talking to you," she typed back. "I'm not used to conversations that don't have agendas." "Most of the best conversations don't," he replied. "What's your agenda for today?" She looked at her laptop, at the stack of files she had brought from her ruined home office, at the carefully planned schedule her assistant had created to keep her professional life on track despite the chaos of displacement. None of it felt urgent anymore. "I'm supposed to review contracts and make client calls," she typed, "but I'm thinking about what you said about living versus planning." "What did I say exactly?" he asked, and she could sense his curiosity even through the digital medium. "That you can't schedule spontaneity," she replied. "I've been thinking about that all morning." There was a pause before his next message arrived. "Are you free this afternoon? I'm off duty, and I know a place that might interest you." The invitation sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. She had meetings scheduled, calls to return, a life to reconstruct with careful precision. But she also had a sudden, overwhelming desire to say yes to something unplanned. "Where?" she typed. "It's a surprise," he replied. "But bring clothes. You can get dirty." She stared at the message, trying to remember the last time she had worn clothes she could get dirty. Her wardrobe consisted of business suits and cocktail dresses, carefully chosen pieces that projected competence and success. The idea of deliberately choosing clothes that might get dirty felt revolutionary. "I don't think I own clothes I can get dirty," she admitted. "Then we'll stop and get some," Malik replied. "Trust me." The word trust appeared on her screen like a challenge. She had built her career on contracts and guarantees, on relationships that were clearly defined and mutually beneficial. But trust implied vulnerability, the possibility of disappointment or betrayal. She looked around her hotel room, the life she had carefully constructed that was now packed into suitcases and temporary solutions. The fire had already destroyed her sense of control. What was one more leap into the unknown? "Okay," she typed, her finger hovering over the send button for a long moment before pressing it. "I'll pick you up at 2, Malik replied. And Olivia, stop overthinking this." She spent the next 3 hours alternating between excitement and terror, changing clothes multiple times before settling on the most casual outfit. She owned dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that costs more than most people's rent. She felt like she was preparing for a job interview in a foreign country, unsure of the dress code or cultural expectations. When Malik arrived at her hotel, he was driving a pickup truck that looked like it had been used for actual work rather than making impressions. He wore jeans and a t-shirt that stretched across his chest, and his easy smile made her feel overdressed despite her attempt at casualness. "You look nervous," he said as she climbed into the passenger seat. "I am nervous," she admitted. "I don't do spontaneous well." "Good thing I do," he said, starting the engine. Sometimes the best experiences are the ones you don't plan for. As they drove through parts of the city she had never seen, Olivia felt something shifting inside her chest, a loosening of the tight control she had maintained for so long. She was about to discover what it meant to trust someone completely, and the prospect terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The community garden existed in a pocket of the city that Olivia had never known existed. Tucked between a row of modest houses and a small park where children played on equipment that had seen better days. Malik parked his truck next to a hand-painted sign that read, "Riverside Community Garden, growing together since 1998. Raised beds filled with winter vegetables stretched out before them, tended by people who looked like they had been working with their hands for years. The air smelled of rich soil and composted leaves, so different from the artificial scents that usually surrounded her that she took a deep breath without thinking. "This is where I come when I need to remember what matters," Malik said, leading her through a gate that squeaked on its hinges. "My grandmother started volunteering here when I was in high school. She said dirt was the best therapy for whatever was bothering you." Olivia followed him along a path lined with dormant flower beds, noting how other gardeners nodded to Malik with genuine affection. They clearly knew him well, and she could see the respect in their eyes when they looked at him. These people valued him not for his professional achievements or social connections, but for who he was as a person. "I've never grown anything," she said, watching an elderly woman carefully tend to a patch of winter greens with the concentration of a surgeon. "I kill houseplants." "That's because you're trying to control them instead of taking care of them," Malik said, stopping beside a plot that was marked with a small wooden sign reading Johnson Family. "Plants don't respond to schedules and demands. They need attention and patience." He knelt beside a row of what looked like small green shoots, examining them with the same careful attention he had shown when checking her for injuries after the fire. His hands moved gently among the plants, pulling weeds and adjusting protective coverings with practiced ease. "What are you growing?" she asked, kneeling beside him despite her concerns about her expensive jeans. "Garlic and onions, mostly," he said, his hands never stopping their gentle work. "My grandmother's recipe required both, and I keep growing them, even though I'm not much of a cook. It makes me feel connected to her." The simple honesty of his statement hit her harder than she expected. She realized that everything in her life was chosen for its utility or its appearance, nothing for its emotional significance. She couldn't think of a single possession that connected her to someone she loved. "Tell me about her," she said, settling more comfortably onto the cold ground. Malik's hands stilled for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a warmth that made her chest tighten. "She was the strongest person I ever knew. Raised 4 kids after my grandfather died, worked 2 jobs, and still found time to volunteer here every weekend. She used to say that growing things was the closest we could get to understanding God's work." "She sounds amazing," Olivia said, and meant it. "She was," Malik agreed. "She's also the one who taught me that helping people wasn't about being a hero. It was about showing up when someone needed you, even if they couldn't ask for help." The statement hung between them, heavy with meaning. Olivia realized that she had never learned how to ask for help, had never even learned how to recognize when she needed it. She had been drowning in her perfectly organized life, and it had taken a literal fire to make her understand how isolated she had become. "I don't know how to do that," she said quietly. "Show up for people, I mean. I don't even know how to show up for myself." Malik looked at her directly, his dark eyes serious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been performing my life instead of living it," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I have dinner parties where I don't enjoy the food. I go to events where I don't know anyone's real name. I work constantly at a job that doesn't fulfill me. I've been so busy maintaining my image that I forgot to figure out who I actually am." "So, who are you?" Malik asked, his hands returning to their gentle work among the plants. "I don't know," she admitted, and the confession felt like stepping off a cliff. "I know who I'm supposed to be, who I've trained myself to be, but I don't know who I am when no one is watching." "You're someone who asks firefighters to coffee," Malik said with a slight smile. "Someone who admits when she's scared and confused. Someone who's willing to get expensive jeans dirty to sit in a garden and talk about things that matter." She looked down at her jeans, noting the dark stains from the rich soil, and realized she didn't care. For the first time in years, she was somewhere she wanted to be, having a conversation that mattered with someone who saw her as more than a professional contact or social connection. "I'm scared," she said, the words barely above a whisper. "Of what?" Malik asked gently. "Of everything," she said, and felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Of starting over, of being alone, of finding out that when I strip away all the performance, there's nothing real underneath." Malik's hands stilled again, and he turned to face her fully. "Olivia, the fact that you're scared means there's something real underneath. People who are just performance don't worry about authenticity." She looked into his eyes and saw no judgment, no calculation, no agenda. Just genuine concern for her well-being and a patience that she had never experienced before. "I don't know how to be real," she whispered. "You're being real right now," he said simply. "This conversation, this moment, this honesty. It's all real." She felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in the armor she had built around her heart. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The snowstorm arrived without warning, transforming the city into a hushed landscape of white that made even familiar streets look foreign. Olivia stood at her hotel window, watching the flakes fall with increasing intensity when her phone buzzed with a text from Malik. "Roads are getting bad. The weather service is calling for 12 inches by morning. Are you safe where you are?" She typed back quickly, surprised by how much his concern meant to her. "I'm fine. The hotel has power and heat. Are you working tonight?" "Just got off shift," he replied. "But I'm worried about you being alone in that place during a storm like this. Hotel generators aren't always reliable." The thought of losing power in her sterile hotel room filled her with the anxiety she hadn't expected. She had grown accustomed to the artificial comfort of climate control and room service. But the prospect of being trapped there in the dark made her feel more isolated than ever. "I'll be okay," she typed. Though she wasn't sure she believed it, her phone rang instead of buzzing with another text, and Malik's voice filled the small room with warmth. "Olivia, I know you're used to handling things on your own, but this storm? It's serious. My apartment is only a few blocks from your hotel, and I have a generator and enough food for a few days." The invitation hung between them, loaded with implications that made her heart race. She had never been to a man's apartment without a clear professional purpose, had never put herself in a situation where she might be seen as vulnerable or dependent. "I don't want to impose," she said, falling back on the polite deflection that had always served her well. "You're not imposing," Malik said firmly. "You're accepting help from someone who cares about your safety. There's a difference." The distinction hit her like a revelation. She had spent so many years framing every interaction in terms of professional advantage or social obligation that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about her well-being without expecting anything in return. "Okay," she said, the word coming out in a rush before she could change her mind. "I'll pack a bag. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes, Malik said. "The roads are still passable, but not for long." She threw clothes into an overnight bag with none of her usual precision, grabbing items based on comfort rather than appearance. The shift felt revolutionary, like she was packing for a different version of herself. Malik's apartment existed in a converted warehouse that had been transformed into loft-style living spaces. The brick walls and exposed beams gave it an industrial warmth that was completely different from her pristine suburban home. Books lined makeshift shelves, and photographs of people she didn't recognize smiled from every surface. "This is beautiful," she said, setting down her bag and looking around with genuine appreciation. "It's not much," Malik said, taking her coat and hanging it on a hook by the door, "but it's home." The word home resonated differently in this space than it had in her carefully decorated house. This apartment felt lived in rather than displayed, comfortable rather than impressive. She could see evidence of Malik's life everywhere. A guitar propped against one wall, running shoes by the door, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. "Tell me about these pictures," she said, gravitating toward a collection of photographs that showed Malik at various ages with people who shared his warm smile. "Family mostly," he said, joining her beside the photos. "That's my grandmother in the garden we visited. This one is my brother Javier with his kids. And this is the crew from the firehouse at last year's charity drive." She studied the images, noting how comfortable Malik looked in all of them, how naturally he seemed to belong. In each group, she realized she had no photographs like these, no visual evidence of connections that mattered. "You have a beautiful family," she said, meaning it. "They're good people," Malik agreed. "They've been asking about you since the fire. News travels fast in the department." The statement surprised her. "They've been asking about me. They want to know about the woman who's been taking up so much of my off-duty time," he said with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "I told them, you're complicated." "Is that what I am?" she asked, turning to face him fully. "Among other things," he said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're also brave and honest and more real than you give yourself credit for." The power chose that moment to flicker, and they both looked toward the windows where the storm was intensifying. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, more intimate, and Olivia became acutely aware of how alone they were. "Are you scared?" Malik asked softly. "Of the storm," she replied, though they both knew he was asking about more than the weather. "Of being here with me," he said, his honesty cutting through her attempt at deflection. She looked around his apartment again, at the evidence of a life lived authentically, at the man who had somehow become the most important person in her carefully controlled world. She was terrified, but not of him. "I'm scared of how much I want to be here," she admitted, the words hanging between them like a bridge she couldn't cross back over. Malik stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Then stay," he said simply, "not because of the storm, but because you want to." The invitation was clear, honest and terrifying in its simplicity. She had built her life on complexity and careful calculation, but Malik was offering her something she had never experienced, the chance to be wanted for exactly who she was in this moment, without performance or pretense. "I want to," she whispered, and felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. The morning light filtered through Malik's windows, casting long shadows across the apartment where Olivia had spent the night curled on his couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like him. She had barely slept, her mind racing between the comfort of his presence and the terror of what her feelings meant. She found him in the kitchen, making coffee with the same methodical care he brought to everything else. He wore gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, and his hair was still mussed from sleep. The domestic intimacy of the moment made her chest tighten with unfamiliar longing. "Good morning," he said, looking up from the coffee maker with a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "Sleep okay?" "Really," she admitted, accepting the mug he offered her. "I kept thinking about everything that's happened since the fire." "Want to talk about it?" he asked, settling beside her at the small table by the window. Outside, the storm had left the city transformed. Snow covered everything in pristine white, making the world look clean and new. But Olivia felt anything but clean. She felt messy and complicated, and terrified of the emotions churning inside her. "I don't know how to do this," she said, gesturing between them. "I don't know how to be with someone like you." "Someone like me?" Malik asked, his voice carefully neutral. She realized how her words sounded and felt her cheeks burn with shame. "I didn't mean it like that. I meant someone who's real, someone who doesn't play games or have hidden agendas, someone who actually cares about me." "You've never been with someone who cared about you?" he asked, and she could hear the disbelief in his voice. "I've been with men who wanted to be seen with me," she said, staring into her coffee. "Men who liked what I represented or what I could do for their careers. But no one who just wanted to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company." Malik reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "That's their loss." The simple gesture made her eyes fill with tears. "I'm scared. I don't know how to be the person you see when you look at me." "You're already that person," he said softly. "You've been her all along. You've just buried her under a lot of performance and expectations." "What if I disappoint you?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been keeping her awake. "What if when you really get to know me, you realize I'm not worth the trouble?" Malik was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and sure. "Olivia, you saved my life." "That's not true," she said, confused. "You saved mine. Before I met you, I was going through the motions," he said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Work, sleep, work, sleep. I wasn't really living, just surviving. But watching you discover who you really are, seeing you choose courage over comfort, it reminded me what it means to be alive." "I don't feel courageous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Malik said. "It's feeling the fear and choosing to act anyway. You've been doing that since the night of the fire." She looked at him, this man who had become her anchor in a world that suddenly felt full of possibility rather than obligation. "I don't know what happens next." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I'd like to find out together, if you're willing." The word "together" hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. She had spent her entire adult life planning for every contingency, mapping out her future with careful precision. But sitting in Malik's kitchen, watching the snow fall outside, she realized that the best things in life couldn't be planned or controlled. "I'm willing," she said, and felt something settle into place inside her chest. "I'm scared, but I'm willing." Malik's smile was radiant. "That's all I need to hear." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. "I should probably get you back to your hotel. The roads are getting cleared, and you have a life to get back to." But as he spoke, Olivia realized that the life she had been living felt increasingly foreign to her. The thought of returning to her hotel room, to her scheduled calls and careful routines, felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit. "What if I don't want to go back?" she asked. "To the hotel?" he asked, turning to face her. "To any of it," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "What if I want to stay here, in this moment where everything feels real and possible?" Malik walked back to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. Then we figure out how to make that happen. Just like that, she asked. Just like that, he confirmed. Life's too short to spend it pretending to be someone you're not. She looked into his eyes and saw her future reflected there. Uncertain but authentic. Challenging but worthwhile. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Don't leave me ever again," she whispered, the words coming from a place deeper than conscious thought. "I won't," he promised, and she believed him completely. The snow had stopped falling by the time Olivia returned to her hotel room, but the world outside still looked transformed, cleaner somehow, as if the storm had washed away everything unnecessary. She stood in her doorway, looking at the space that had felt like a refuge just days before, and realized it now felt like a prison. Her laptop sat open on the desk, displaying 17 missed calls from her assistant and 43 unread emails, marked urgent. The red notification badges glowed like warning lights, demanding her attention with the same insistence that had driven her life for years. But for the first time, she felt no compulsion to respond immediately. She called her assistant, instead, knowing the conversation would be difficult but necessary. "Olivia, thank God." Sandra's voice came through the phone, sharp with relief and frustration. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. The Morrison contract needs your review, and the partners are asking about your timeline for the Henderson case." "Sandra, I need you to reschedule everything for the next week," Olivia said, settling into the uncomfortable hotel chair. "Reschedule everything." Sandra's voice pitched higher. "Olivia, you have the Henderson deposition on Thursday. You've been preparing for months." "I know," Olivia said, and was surprised by how calm she felt. "But I need time to figure some things out." "Figure what out?" Sandra demanded. "You're one of the most organized people I know. You don't figure things out, you plan them." The statement hit Olivia like a revelation. Sandra was right. She had spent years planning her life with such precision that she had forgotten how to adapt, how to grow, how to change course when something better presented itself. "Maybe that's the problem," Olivia said quietly. There was a long pause before Sandra spoke again, her voice softer. "Olivia, are you okay? You've been different since the fire. Not bad different, just ... different." "I'm more okay than I've been in years," Olivia said, and realized she meant it. "I just need some time to figure out what that means." After she hung up, Olivia sat in the silence of her hotel room, feeling the weight of the decision she was contemplating. Her phone buzzed with a text from Malik. "How are you feeling about everything this morning?" She found herself typing honestly, terrified and exhilarated and confused all at once. "Want to talk about it?" He replied immediately. "More than anything," she typed back, "I'm off duty until tomorrow night. Want to spend the day together. No agenda, no plans. Just see what happens." The invitation represented everything she had been too afraid to embrace. Spontaneity, trust, the possibility of joy without purpose. Her old self would have declined politely, citing work obligations and the need to maintain professional boundaries. But her old self had been slowly suffocating under the weight of her own expectations. "Yes," she typed, and felt something inside her chest expand with the possibility. When Malik arrived at her hotel an hour later, she was ready with a confession that had been building since she woke up in his apartment. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said as soon as he walked through the door, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. He stopped in the middle of her hotel room, his expression serious. "You think you are, or you know you are?" "I know I am," she said, her voice stronger now. "And it terrifies me because I don't know how to love someone without trying to control the relationship." "You don't have to control it," Malik said, moving closer to her. "You just have to show up for it." "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "You're doing it right now," he said, reaching for her hands. "You're being honest about your feelings, even though it scares you. You're choosing vulnerability over safety." She looked down at their joined hands, noting how perfectly hers fit in his. How natural the connection felt despite how foreign it was to her experience. "I've never felt this way about anyone," she said quietly. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I want to build a life with you," she said, the words coming from a place deeper than conscious thought. Like, I want to learn how to be real with someone who sees me completely. Malik's expression softened. Olivia, I've been falling in love with you since the night I carried you out of that fire. Not because you needed saving, but because of how you handled being saved. You were scared and vulnerable and completely human, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. Really? She asked, hardly daring to believe it. Really, he confirmed. But I need you to know that loving me means loving all of me. My world, my family, my values. It means accepting that we come from different places, and that some people won't understand what we have. The statement hung between them, heavy with the reality of their differences. She had been so focused on her own internal transformation that she hadn't fully considered the external challenges they would face. Are you ready for that? He asked gently. She thought about her carefully constructed life, about the people who knew her only as a professional success, about the assumptions and expectations that had shaped her world for so long. Then she thought about how she felt in Malik's presence, seen, valued authentically herself. I'm ready to try, she said. I'm ready to choose love over safety, even if it means giving up everything I thought I wanted. Malik's smile was brilliant. You're not giving up anything important. You're just making room for something better. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt the last of her resistance crumble. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged, with someone who loved her not for what she could do or how she looked, but for who she was when all the performance fell away. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I love you too, he said, his voice warm with promise. And I'm not going anywhere. 3 weeks later, Olivia stood in the doorway of her rebuilt home, keys heavy in her hand as she surveyed the space that had once defined her entire identity. The contractors had done excellent work. The electrical damage was completely repaired, the walls were freshly painted, and new hardwood floors gleamed under the afternoon sunlight streaming through. Cleaned windows, but the house felt like a museum dedicated to a person she no longer recognized. The furniture that had survived the fire sat in the same carefully arranged positions. The artwork hung at precise angles, and every surface remained spotless and untouched. It was exactly as she had designed it, and it felt completely foreign. Malik stood behind her, his presence steady and grounding as she processed the strange disconnect between the life she had built and the person she had become. It's beautiful, he said, his voice carefully neutral. It's not home anymore, she replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. What makes a place home? He asked, moving to stand beside her. You, she said simply. These past weeks. Staying at your apartment, waking up beside you, learning how to live instead of just maintaining an image. That feels like home. They had fallen into a rhythm that felt both natural and revolutionary. She had extended her leave from work indefinitely, using the fire as an excuse to step away from the demanding schedule that had once defined her worth. Instead, she spent her days learning how to be present, cooking meals that she actually tasted, having conversations that mattered, discovering parts of the city she had never bothered to explore. The lease on this place doesn't expire for another 6 months, she said, looking around at the pristine space. I could sell it, or rent it out, or just walk away. What do you want to do? Malik asked, the question that had become central to her transformation. I want to stop living in spaces that feel like stage sets, she said. I want to live somewhere that shows evidence of actual life being lived. Malik smiled, the expression that had become her favorite sight in the world. I know a place that could use a woman's touch. The rent's reasonable, the neighbors are friendly, and there's already someone there who's crazy about you. Is that your way of asking me to move in with you? She asked, turning to face him fully. That's my way of asking you to build a life with me, he said, his honesty cutting through any ambiguity. Not just sharing space, but creating something together that belongs to both of us. The invitation represented everything she had been. Too afraid to want, partnership instead of independence, vulnerability instead of control, love instead of achievement. Her old life had been built on the foundation of what she could accomplish alone. But Malik was offering her something she had never experienced, the chance to be stronger together than she had ever been by herself. I've never lived with anyone, she admitted. I don't know how to share space or compromise or make decisions together. Neither did I before my grandmother moved in with me after her stroke, Malik said. But I learned that sharing space isn't about giving up independence. It's about choosing to be interdependent. What's the difference? She asked. Independence means I can take care of myself, he said. Interdependence means I choose to take care of you too, and you choose to take care of me. We're both whole. People who decide to build something together. The distinction resonated with her in a way that felt like understanding herself for the first time. She had spent years believing that needing someone was weakness, that depending on another person was a failure of self-sufficiency. But Malik was describing something entirely different, a conscious choice to create connection. What would that look like? She asked. Building something together. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I'd like to find out. I'd like to wake up next to you every morning and figure out how to make each day matter. I'd like to introduce you to my family as the woman I love, not just someone I'm seeing. I'd like to plan a future that includes both of us. The word future had always felt like a business plan to her, something to be strategized and optimized for maximum efficiency. But when Malik said it, it sounded like a promise, like an adventure they would embark on together. I'd like that, too, she said, and felt something settle into place inside her chest. I'd like to learn how to be loved and how to love someone back without trying to control the outcome. It's not about control, Malik said, stepping closer to her. It's about trust. Trusting that what we have is strong enough to handle whatever comes, trusting that we're both committed to figuring it out together. She looked around her rebuilt house one more time, at the life she had constructed with such careful precision, and realized that none of it mattered without someone to share it with. The fire had destroyed her possessions, but it had also cleared the way for something infinitely more valuable, the chance to build a life based on connection rather than achievement. I want to trust you, she said. I want to trust us. Then, let's start with something small, Malik said, pulling her into his arms. Move in with me. Let's see what happens when we stop planning our relationship and start living it. She kissed him then, tasting the promise of a future that couldn't be controlled or guaranteed, only experienced. For the first time in her life, the uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Let's build something beautiful together. The law firm's conference room felt like a tomb when Olivia walked in for what she knew would be her final meeting as a corporate lawyer. The partners sat around the mahogany table with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed anger. Their expensive suits and perfectly groomed appearances, a stark reminder of the world she was choosing to leave behind. Olivia, we need to discuss your extended absence. Senior partner Robert Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of disappointed expectations. The Henderson case alone represents millions in potential revenue. I understand the financial implications, she replied, settling into the chair that had once represented the pinnacle of her professional ambitions. But I won't be returning to handle the Henderson case or any other case. The silence that followed was deafening. These were people who had known her for years, who had watched her climb the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency, who had never seen her make a decision based on anything other than strategic advantage. You're having some kind of breakdown, Margaret Chen said, her voice mixing concern with frustration. The fire was traumatic, but you can't let it derail your entire career. I'm not having a breakdown, Olivia said calmly. I'm having a breakthrough. I'm finally understanding the difference between success and fulfillment. Success is fulfillment, Robert countered. You've worked for 15 years to build your reputation in this firm. You can't just walk away because you're going through a difficult time. I'm not walking away because I'm going through a difficult time, she said, standing up from the table. I'm walking away because I've found something more important than this job. What could be more important than your career? Crete asked, genuinely bewildered. Love, Olivia said simply. Connection. The chance to build a life with someone who sees me as more than a collection of professional achievements. The word love seemed to hang in the air like a foreign concept. She realized that in all her years at the firm, she had never heard anyone discuss love as a factor in major life decisions. Everything was calculated in terms of advancement, compensation, and strategic positioning. Olivia, you're talking about giving up everything you've worked for? Robert said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. For what? A relationship that might not even last. I'm not giving up everything I've worked for, she said, feeling a clarity she had never experienced before. I'm choosing to work for something that actually matters to me. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had been her colleagues for years, and realized that she barely knew any of them as human beings. They were professional contacts, people who shared her ambition and her drive, but she couldn't name a single one of their hopes or fears or dreams outside of corporate success. I'm grateful for everything I've learned here, she said, addressing the room. But I'm not the same person who started working here 15 years ago. I want different things now. What things? Margaret asked. I want to wake up excited about my day instead of dreading it, Olivia said. I want to do work that helps people instead of just generating profit. I want to build relationships based on authenticity instead of professional advantage. And you think you can do that with this firefighter? Robert asked, his tone making it clear what he thought of her choice. I think I can do that with the man I love, she corrected firmly. Someone who sees my worth as a human being rather than as a revenue generator. She walked to the window overlooking the city, seeing it with new eyes. The buildings that had once represented opportunity and achievement now looked like monuments to ambition that came at the cost of human connection. I'm resigning effective immediately, she said, turning back to face the partners. I'll finish any urgent matters remotely, but I won't be coming back to this office. You're making a mistake, Robert said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Maybe, she agreed, but it's my mistake to make. And for the first time in my life, I'm making a choice based on what I want instead of what I think I should want. As she walked out of the conference room, leaving behind the career that had defined her for 15 years, Olivia felt lighter than she had in decades. She was stepping into uncertainty, but it was uncertainty filled with possibility rather than fear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Malik. How did it go? I'm free, she typed back, and meant it in every sense of the word. Come home, he replied. I'll make dinner, and we can talk about what comes next. Home. The word had a different meaning now, one that had nothing to do with real estate or interior design and everything to do with the person waiting for her there. She walked out of the building into the afternoon sunlight, ready to discover what her life could look like when she chose love over fear, authenticity over performance, and partnership over solitary achievement. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the kitchen of the apartment she now shared with Malik, morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the community garden where they had first been honest with each other. The space bore evidence of their life together. His grandmother's recipe cards mixed with her law books, photographs of his family sharing wall space with the few pieces of art she had salvaged from her old life. Good morning, beautiful, Malik said, emerging from the bedroom with his hair still mussed from sleep. He wrapped his arms around her waist as she made coffee, the gesture so natural now that she couldn't remember what mornings had felt like without it. Good morning, she replied, leaning back against his chest. Sleep well. Always do when you're here, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. What's on your agenda today? The question that had once filled her with anxiety now made her smile. Her days were no longer scheduled with military precision, but they were fuller than they had ever been. She had started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, using her skills to help people who couldn't afford representation. The work paid a fraction of what she had made at the firm, but it gave her something she had never experienced: the satisfaction of making a real difference in people's lives. I have 3 client meetings at the clinic, she said, turning in his arms to face him. And then I thought I'd stop by the garden to check on the winter vegetables we planted. Our vegetables, he corrected with a grin. You're the one who's been obsessing over those tomato plants. I'm not obsessing, she protested, laughing. I'm caring for them. There's a difference. Is there? He asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Yes, she said firmly. Obsessing is trying to control something. Caring is nurturing something and letting it grow. Like us, he said, his voice growing serious. Like us, she agreed, reaching up to touch his face. We're growing into something I never imagined possible. They had learned to navigate the challenges of their different worlds with patience and humor. His family had welcomed her with warmth once they saw how happy she made him, and she had gradually built friendships based on genuine connection rather than professional networking. I love you, she said, the words coming as naturally as breathing now. I love you too, he replied, kissing her forehead. Ready for another day of not knowing what's going to happen? With you? She said, smiling up at him. I'm ready for anything. As they sat together over coffee, planning their day with the easy collaboration of two people who had learned to build a life together, Olivia marveled at how much had changed since the night fire had destroyed everything she thought she wanted. The fire had taken her house, her possessions, and her carefully constructed image. But it had given her something infinitely more valuable, the chance to discover who she really was when all the performance fell away, and the love of a man who saw her completely and chose to stay. She was no longer the woman who had prioritized achievement over connection, who had built walls to protect herself from vulnerability. She was someone who had learned to trust, to love, to be loved in return, and for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged.